Hello, Anders and James. Welcome to Theosophy, History, and Occult Studies. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Anders. James.
Hi.
There's Anders. Hey, James. How's it going? Glad to have you. Oh, wait. Oh, there. We don't even have our video on. Ta-da! Still have that anti-flicker. What's that, Anders?
Good evening.
Evening.
Good
I mean, good morning to you, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we'll go ahead and get started here on this spring equinox. Is today like this? It's not like isn't the spring equinox would be on this?
We already had it. I think it was on the 19th.
Yeah, it's not right with Easter.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Just like winter isn't right with Christmas yet. Because it has more to do with like a permanent place so it's going to move around on days, right? Because that we don't have that accurate of a count, right? In my little Blavatsky quotation book for today, the 31st, she says, this is from Secret Doctrine, Volume 1, 643, so way at the end of Volume 1. The only decree of karma, an eternal and immutable decree, is absolute harmony in the world of matter as it is in the world of spirit. It is not, therefore, karma that rewards or punishes, but it is we who reward or punish ourselves according to whether we work with, through, and along with nature, abiding by the laws on which that harmony depends or break them. Oh, that's a more thoughtful one than usual, I think. Karma, it's not karma that rewards or punishes, it's how if we're going in, like living in concert with that karma, correct?
Yeah. That's why she makes a comment that adepts work with karma, but they don't create karma because they follow the natural tendency of what is supposed to unfold, and it's us that limits and creates more karma, so things don't happen when they should. Sometimes they happen, hundreds of years later because of the actions of humanity.
It leads me to believe, especially when we talk about like the globes and races and just like the crazy history of the secret doctrine. It makes me almost think that there has to have been ages. I'm sure it's in the Gita or something talks about this as well. Like an age where maybe the majority of humanity is actually following this, and like you could really speed up Kali Yuga if you had kind of an epic of that, or
that's what they say. The golden age is when there are adept kings and avatars, and people are following their guidance, and also they're more in tune with the natural laws. I mean, even now, even though we're in Kali Yuga, there's native peoples that wherever they're in, whether it's South America, Africa, here, Siberia, that are in tune with nature, and so they are more aware of their inner prompting from universal consciousness, where we've blocked it for so long because of our materialistic intellect growing that we're not receptive to it. So a lot of people don't even listen to their own conscience because it's not logical according to what their desire is. It doesn't make sense in their society. It's like, well, I should do this, but if I do this, I'm going to get away with it and it'll be better for me. So I'll do whatever I want to do until I'm caught, and I'll deal with the laws, not thinking that there's natural karmic law that doesn't get blocked, and it isn't part of man-made law.
And I think a lot of us live that way, kind of a little bit recklessly. We're not consciously bad people or anything, but we're taking chances. We're kind of treating things like a gamble sometimes, or we have to get one over on karma because we can maybe make up for it later or something.
Right.
But it brings me back to an idea. that I constantly go back to, which is like one of the many golden threads of all wisdom traditions, are that the majority of the mankind, or even third or half of mankind, was living by the precepts of any of these wisdom traditions, you'd almost have heaven on earth. You'd almost have no need for that cake in the sky kind of something working towards, and life is hell, but at least I'm going to get to heaven. You would have, you could be thinking a lot more of karma and reincarnation and cycles if you could at least get a semblance of heaven on earth, and that's just what you were talking about. Yeah.
Well, also, if we read on the secret doctrine about karma, it says that literally karma means motion. So what is it in motion in the whole universe?
Mm-hmm.
Everything is in motion, even the atoms of this table.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. Nothing that really not in motion. So that's one aspect of karma. The other side of karma is the law of retribution, which it says is infallible in that sense of retribution. So like when you were reading or saying, so if we're going to use the word create, we do create our own karma.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore we can change our own karma with our thinking and acts and everything. So, but there's that huge law of karma that everything manifested is under that law.
Mm-hmm.
But under that law, we can choose how to live our lives,
Mm-hmm.
whether be a full person in Kali Yuga, and act like really in that sense that the spiritual inner self in ourselves is totally obscure. We don't allow anything of the spiritual ideas or things to help people. So that's really a really black Kali Yuga, which is called the Black Edge, right?
Yeah.
So the idea that if you don't want to live that way, when you want to live in the area of where you follow your intuition, your spiritual ideas, your higher self, then you're not really living Kali Yuga, although you are within the realm of Kali Yuga, but mentally you are not living it. So therefore, that's why the law of karma is really not easy to grasp or understand.
Oh yeah.
It's not a man-made law.
Well, and there's
universal law.
Still no algorithm, I think, that comes close. It's so complex. I mean, I think a lot of the world at large kind of sees karma as only on an individual basis. They only see the whole law of karma as just what they're doing, what they're creating. But then a lot of people don't think about things like national karma, cultural karma, like these things that, I mean, the math and equations evolved. I don't think we're anywhere even near yet to really be able to pin that down. But it's one of those things that it's a lot easier to see in hindsight, like the effects of karma and things like that.
Well, the thing is that people they don't try to understand even history from a karmic perspective.
Of course, yeah.
If they did, then there would be certain that karma is an active law and they would change. I mean, we do not learn from history because it was some other generation's mistakes. And so even if whether it's a different culture or a different group of people in the same country, they're looking at it like, well, yeah, they made mistakes, but we're going to do better.
Yeah.
But they're not looking at it as like, it wasn't just 3 or 4 people that made mistakes. It was group karma. And because of it, the whole group suffers.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't apply that to their current day and events.
And I think one benefit of being able to see karma like that is our whole thing here is universal brotherhood. You can look at karma as the entire globe of all humanity. They're all in this together. No one's changing the humanity's karma in a positive way when they're fighting different parts of humanity or compartmentalizing humanity. You have to be united to even budge that, I think. Yeah, of course. All right. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, but when I came here the first time, I have misunderstanding of the karma, because when you come, you say it's action and reaction. But when you read the aphorism of karma, William Hiyash, you see the complexity of the whole law.
Mhm.
You know, the whole law is more profound that we understand. And the second thing that I want to say is that it's connected with the first noble truth and the first nidana. The first nidana is the ignorant, and the other one is the first noble truth is the suffering.
Mhm.
And there you have the connection between both two things. Those two things are essential to understand a little bit of karma.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's why they focus on that so much, and that's why I think too. I think that's why they make it the first that all life is suffering, because that's one of the hardest humps to get over. That's one of the hardest things to accept. So they put it right first. Like you need to, first and foremost, need to accept this. And it shows a lot of, when we talk about, especially when we get into like Blavatsky and Alcott getting to India, it shows kind of like radical differences, especially in cultures back then that were more separated in the wisdom traditions that aren't so steeped in a fear of death as like a lot of these Eastern wisdom traditions, where now like, Western society for as long as Judeo-Christianity has been around has been to dread death. That it's this scary, scary, horrible thing. Even if heaven's real and you lived a good life, for some reason it's still this really scary, almost negatively. People don't want to say they look at it negatively, but it brings a sense of gloom to everybody. And but you don't see that kind of attachment to life, I guess, so much in like Buddhism and Hinduism. But yeah, anyway.
And we see that the persons that, not that I'm not attached to the body, but the more attached you are to your body, it seems like you suffer more, because then you tend to think, I die and that's it, nothing else, no more hope for anything.
Mhm.
Which in Theosophy you learn that the body is one thing, is your vehicle, but the true self is something else.
Mhm.
It's something that comes and goes, in different bodies.
Mhm.
So you begin to suffer less because you change your ideas.
Mhm.
And that's the beauty of Theosophy, that it helps to change a lot of things in your mind, because everything is really in your mind.
Mhm.
Suffering is in your mind too.
Mhm.
You suffer because of the way you think. And again, I'm not saying that
You lower medicine.
I'm not scared for suffering, but that you change little by little, you begin to change and you live a happier life.
Mm.
Every moment you're happier for everything that surrounds you.
For sure.
I'm happy now.
And I think you see, like one of my favorite things, like early Christian Gnosticism, you saw this meeting of Christianity with these Eastern traditions that came from Zoroastrianism and a little bit from Manichaeism, I believe. And they were kind of that same thing, where it was like in Gnostic Christianity, the whole world is a cage. Your body is a flawed cage that is not meant to be, it's meant to kind of be escaped. And that's how they kind of drove that home with the Gnostics, is like your body was made imperfect. It is suffering. The only not suffering is to get out. But
See, there's a danger in that creates an escapism.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that even with some, some Buddhist traditions, they just feel like everything, this is impermanent, this is non-existent, this is not important. If it wasn't important, you wouldn't be here.
Right.
And it also, HPB makes the point that you can only get enlightenment while you're in a body.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the distinction. It has a function, it has a purpose, and part of that purpose is for our thinking to impact the lives that make up our body, the nature that makes up our body, in a positive way, so that as reincarnation and cycles progress, we're going to have more and more intelligent stuff to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the problem, is if you see, everything is suffering and escapism, a lot of Catholicism is based on that.
Right.
Greed, and then you have to have a certain amount, because you have greed, then you're going to have a certain amount of penance you have to do.
And also martyrdom.
And the martyrdom.
Yeah.
And that's, and we see it with like how they can educate people that are not educated to be terrorists, in the sense that, well, if you do this for God, you're going to go to heaven.
Yeah, life sucks anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're having a bad existence, and this will help solve the problem. And so I think it's important to not have an attachment to this plane, but also realize it has a function, and we have an importance in it. And if we didn't, we wouldn't be here. And you can't just look at it as like, oh, it doesn't really matter, because karma will present to you cases where it definitely matters that you're here.
For sure.
And it's not all suffering, but, everybody, no matter what level of economic group, education, social group, they're all going to endure some kind of pain, because that's part of this plane, and part of learning.
It's similar to, I think Theosophy has a way of avoiding this in a way, but like in a lot of the Dzogchen studies with Lama Karma and a lot of things with Dzogchen and like these higher Buddhist teachings is like, they're warning you against nihilism at all times. They're saying like, listen, emptiness doesn't mean nothing. It means fullness, and it's a danger at all times for people to fall into just nihilism that would be, that leads to a lot of scary things. And I think Theosophy has a way, and it might just be my interpretation, but has a way of avoiding that by maintaining a sense of wonder, and by maintaining like fascinating things that are fascinating and wonderful about the physical world and about our own history and about these things. So it kind of does it. It avoids some of that bleakness of pure existentiality, and I really appreciate that, because I agree. I think that there's a lot of religions that have nothing to do with Theosophy as well, that teach, that teach that the reason we're on Earth, the great plan, in a different way of saying, a lot of them say it's because you're able to speed things up while you're in a body, or you have to be in a body to achieve this or to achieve salvation, all these things. And it's similar to that, but makes a bit more sense on some other levels. We will, let's see if we have, I want to make sure if we have any questions before I move on. No, we're good.
So I want to what you were saying,
Please.
about nihilism. There's also Blavatsky mentions why in the Theosophical system, the sevenfold system counts the physical body. Because she says the physical body, we count it in Theosophy as a vehicle. We include it because it's a body of consciousness. So even though it's a vehicle, but still all the lives within the body, its lives is conscious, and they're conscious and they're intelligent. So therefore, we need to realize and find out, why do we embody these lives of consciousness? And therefore, it's included in the sevenfold system of Theosophy.
Thank you. So I think we'll dive right back into history. We're still kind of post ISIS Unveiled and the public reaction, literary reaction, Christian reaction. I think a lot of us know quite a bit about ISIS Unveiled, so I'll try to go a little bit faster, but I think it's important to realize that it seems like it kind of shifted, a big shift in Theosophy before she went to India, and all through the early days of India it kind of shifted from focusing on explaining things to spiritualists to almost an adversarial relation with, like, especially the Roman Catholic Church, but a lot of institutional Christianity that hadn't been very favorable in ISIS Unveiled. Even though me, I was raised as a Christian and all of that, I find her writings, when she does talk about Christian, you see this love of, you know, the Christ figure as a world teacher. And I find that, like, I don't know, as my Christian sensibilities are kind of delighted by the writings of when she talks about Christianity, because she's sticking to that wisdom tradition, that golden thread of Christianity, where it's almost this repeated story, but newer ways. And yeah, so I don't want to like rip on Christianity too much. So most of this is Blavatsky's words when we talk about Christianity and stuff. So I mean, I'm pretty much in agreement with Christianity, but you can almost see after Isis Unveiled, there was, and especially in the early days of India when they were getting real traction with membership and expansion, that you see her letters and her articles in those days, and she seems more energetic, more like she has more of a fire than a lot of other times. Like she's actively talking about, like, I mean, she can tell that the society had real power and real traction, and nobody, I don't think anybody's like immune to getting excited about the potential of that kind of thing, especially, you know, kind of being responsible for like this resurgence of pure spirituality in India and where they went. But yeah, so it's great. She doesn't just rip on Christianity. There's a lot of talk about, you know, helping to find the root of these wisdom traditions in the East, especially Hinduism and branches of Buddhism, and doing what she can to even enable them to grow and to get back in touch with the original things. Because as we'll see when she gets to India, it was a very different India than what people perceive as this spiritual wonder. But yeah, so I wanted to start with one of the things that we notice is a lot. I noticed very early on is that she is in love with Plato, and I think most Theosophists are really in love with Plato. And as she talks about a lot of his exposure to the East. And that's one of the great things that she's able to do in Isis, especially in the Secret Doctrine, is synthesize these things, these teachings, and even show us where some of this stuff that Plato is talking about came from, and that he just kind of unleashed, not necessarily just him, but I mean Socrates and his teachers as well, but you know, just kind of shot off onto all of like what Western, I guess, society was back then. So yeah, in this, I like some of this. It says, in this quest among the ancients, Madame Blavatsky turns first and often to Plato. She calls the Platonic philosophy the most elaborate compendium. Oh, I don't even have it. One sec. Of the abstruse system of old India, which can alone afford us this middle ground. In Plato, she saw the link between Eastern and Western thought. This is Blavatsky speaking, Plato was, in the fullest sense of the word, the world's interpreter, and the greatest philosopher of the pre-Christian era mirrored faithfully in his works the spiritualism of the Vedic philosophers who lived thousands of years before him, and its metaphysical expression. And that there's something really to be said about that too, because a lot of the sources I think Plato was getting were purely of an oral tradition for thousands of years. I don't think he had, I wouldn't guess he had many documents of these Vedic traditions to work from. And that's kind of, it's really amazing to think of like an oral tradition that detailed and that accurate, like surviving for that long and that robust. Just as Plato had summed up the knowledge of the ancient East in his philosophy, transmitting to the Western world the accumulated wisdom of the prehistoric past, so Madame Blavatsky also became the transmitter of ancient teachings, the world's interpreter of the 19th century. I love that, so I just wanted to get to that because it's her admiration of Plato is very similar to what the role she's stepping into is what she admires him for. One thing I love about Theosophy is, friends and family and people, like running into people that have interests in like psychology or parapsychology, metaphysics, philosophy. and them to kind of think, their impression of Theosophy might just be like, oh, it's a cult or it's whatever. And so you'll talk to them about philosophy. And I have a really good friend with 2 doctorates in philosophy, and she was blown away she didn't know that the monadus was Plato. She thought it was purely Spinoza's. And I was like, no, and the monad is pretty much all of Theosophy. And it brings this like respect, really? And like some of these concepts that are, and sometimes it's different language. I just had a really good friend that is really, really involved in like paranormal, like kind of research or like the history of the paranormal and phenomenon and stuff. And he started studying, and I think going to some online classes, but gods and elementals and the study of elementals that we know very well from the last few weeks, he said it's just like opened up this new world. He said it's like going home. He just has all this clarity to this stuff that's been questionable through a lot of his studies. And it's like, it's just this, he didn't know the term elemental. And it's this concise word that he's like so grateful to. And I love it.
Well, because people can study all those other philosophies at any university across the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really study Theosophy in many places.
That's right.
And, some people have read books on their own, but it's not where you can have a discussion with a lot of students. That's why, that was the whole purpose of this lodge. And yeah, it's something that has to, it's not something that you're going to get a degree in. And so a lot of people don't pursue it. They're pursuing their career. And, for a lot of people, a philosophy degree is the way you get to teach at a university.
Mm.
And there's universities all over the world where you can do that.
I mean, I have to, no, not so much today, but I was even thinking if maybe back in the day at like Oxford or some of these places with really big philosophy departments, if they did have some kind of at least study of Theosophy at the time. I wonder, or if any comparative religion really goes into it. Because I mean, there's major colleges that have courses on Taylor Swift now. You'd think someone would whip up a Theosophy course.
You're kidding, right?
Oh, yeah, they have courses on
Anything.
Yeah.
Taylor Swift.
I was just reading about that. They didn't want it at BYU, the Mormon college. They have a Taylor Swift course. Okay, cool. And they have like a 2-year waiting list to get into it or something because
Oh, wow.
I mean, if you like Taylor Swift, a pretty easy degree, I guess. Just coast.
I mean, can you just Google stuff?
Yeah, watch a bunch of videos. I don't know.
YouTube.
I wonder if it gets really deep though. That would be kind of respectful to talk about the phenomenon, what it means and stuff. That would be interesting.
Well, there are courses on on Plato, on
Of course, yeah.
ancient Greeks, but I think they might have a somewhat of a limited understanding too, if they don't know about the metaphysics behind the teachings of this, and maybe some of them do or have an inkling, but I think a lot of times you watch some programs. On science programs about ancient cultures, and they have this interpretation of like, oh, well, it's these ancient burial rites, or it's or based on the sun, and they kind of go a little bit, but they don't really get to the core of what some of the meanings of these ancient cultures held, or
right. Well, and I don't know, I still pay a lot of attention to like the realm of academia and history and archaeology and stuff. And we're actually, especially with history and ancient history, we're still going by the stories told and the conclusions made over 100 years ago about these ancient societies and about the world and about history. And we have a lot more to go on now. We've got DNA, we have all this stuff it's becoming this problem, how to wedge these new things that we know into this history that doesn't work. And they're calling it heterodox history and things like, because there's been a lot of genetic research done on all kinds, every realm of Native American peoples in North America and South America. And the whole idea of one migration is been blown to pieces. I mean, it's happened over 20,000 years, many different groups, extremely varied genetically. And yet, I don't know when they're ever going to teach this in school, you know, but a lot of things like that as well. And it's stuff that, like, when you read it in The Secret Doctrine, things that sound like they can't be history, it has to be some kind of symbolism or something. But, like, wait a second. Like, maybe, I mean, if we could lose this much in 5,000 years of our history, if we could lose this much, of course we could have lost a civilization like Atlantis 20,000 years ago, and there'd be no remnant, almost nothing, you know? I mean, the pyramids in Egypt was only ended about 3,500 years ago, and there is not much of that. I mean,
Well, that's according to our science.
exactly.
That's according to our science.
Yeah.
And, you know, even HPB says that, you know, with the Egyptologists at the time were using all the surveying of the pyramids to prove that the inch was the measure of eternity. You know, so it shows you like what your presumption is when you're going to prove a theorem. You can use a lot of data that you collect to prove it. That doesn't make it accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And once it's being taught, that becomes the accepted idea of that system, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, the Egyptian Book of the Dead has been talked about for decades. Very few would even suggest, except philosophers, that it's a treatise on meditation and conscious awareness of other states. They talked about it as a burial rite, which it can be interpreted as.
Sure.
You know, the
But it's
Bhagavad
almost
Gita is a history book of
Yeah.
war between two families. So that becomes what is accepted of the teaching if, you know, there's no one questioning it.
Right. And it almost demeans the culture and the history it came from. That, like, all this is a story, like at best. Yeah, because I mean, we see a lot of these wisdom traditions, a lot of the stuff that is really making sense to us or blowing our minds these days, people have known in some way or another for thousands upon thousands of years. And I mean, it's even ancient Greece that we think about was really advanced for its time. I can't imagine being alive back then and having any kind of perspective or understanding anywhere near Plato or like Eastern adepts. I mean, I would think all life was about was survival and, you know, but wow, I mean, it's a lot harder world back then in a life, and I think this still had time to get these truths out. That's amazing. One thing I did want to go over too is some of these and a lot of this is for my benefit, because these are some of these in the end of Isis, when it goes over what I guess is called, I mean, there's these precepts kind of these 10 basic propositions, and I've always kind of wondered about them, and I kind of want to go over them, so if you guys will indulge me. But I'll start by reading the postulates laid down. We've seen them, these kind of laid down before and prior to Isis Unveiled, but she kind of, I guess this is kind of finalized in Isis. One, the reality of man as a spiritual being with a life independent as well as in a physical body. Two, an almost incredible antiquity for the human race through millions of years of rises and falls in civilizations, the vicissitudes of which are governed by the great law of cycles, karma, which law does not affect all mankind at one and the same time, thus explaining the existence of the most advanced races side by side with tribes sunk in savagery. Whereas, I mean, that one's a lot to think about it, but it's right along what we've been talking about this entire class. It's interesting. And number three, an intellectual and spiritual evolution, as well as the physical evolution of modern science, the former proceeding under well-defined principles of soul development. I love that third one because, yeah, that one sounds amazing. That sounds almost like one of these ideal philosopher king societies that we're thinking of. This intellectual understanding that we can spiritually evolve along with physical evolution. Yeah, I love that. And so in the last chapter, Isis provides a recapitulation of the entire work, and it's really helpful in the 10 basic propositions. Because in which state and substance, we'll get to those, but these are really helpful to me because I have a tendency to read things like a textbook and just read the history and the information. And I'm just getting history and information without a lot of what it means and why she's telling me these things. And so I did want to go over this. Number one, there is no miracle. Everything that happens is the result of law, eternal and ever active. And so that would, even at the time she said this, do you think she had students and people around her that were like, wait a second, by number one, they were like, we saw you do a bunch of miracles. And even some of the colleagues but like that explanation is it's the result of law. It's karma. She's not imposing her will to produce phenomena.
Well, yeah, and the thing was, like, the reason you put out a good point. The reason why she filled the book with so much history and philosophy is to awaken these points in your own intuitive nature in your mind. And the reason why she did phenomenon was to prove that she could do it under any condition, and she's using laws of nature to do it, and she can only do it because she learned those laws of nature, and she developed the senses and the intelligence within her physical body to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But people, being normal people, wanted to see something more spectacular. So they kept giving her more and more phenomenon to do, or requesting more and more phenomenon. And they weren't interested in what she was teaching. She was interested in the magic of what she could do.
Mm.
And then that's why the masters told her, you gotta stop, because it's never gonna end.
Yeah.
There's always gonna be a different trick that people want you to perform, and it's gonna turn into a circus act as
Exactly.
opposed to a teaching of actual science and metaphysics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing that most people miss in all of her writings is you could study Buddhism, you could study ancient Christianity and come to the same
Right.
awareness. But to do it, you have to do it internally. You have to awaken spiritual senses so you're on the plane of reality and not on the plane of relative reality.
Right.
And that's what she was trying to, and when she came out, all the things that she did with the spiritualists and stuff was a warning.
Mm.
You're messing with the lowest level
Oh, right.
of the fields that you don't understand. And yeah, you can do some things, but they're using you more than you're using them.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, it's going to be detrimental for you.
And the elementals you're empowering, these things you're just making from psychic remnants. That's one thing I've wondered about as well. Like in those seances, when you did kind of, because of the whole and the process, kind of create this elemental psychic, ghoul of the past, is it able to like actually cause trouble externally from just you and that seance?
Yeah, look at
It's still a
look,
thing.
if people get so fascinated by elementals and that whole aspect. Look what happens at the end of a team winning the World Series or winning the football championship, the basketball game. They're so happy. They go out in the street and they riot. And you have people
Turn over cars and
people that would never do that, turning over buses, lighting cars on fire, hanging off. What made them do that? They were swept up in crowd mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a giant elemental.
Wow.
With the power.
The collective, everything.
Well, mass delusion, it's an elemental, yeah.
It's just the mind plane that you're passively active in, as opposed to, wow, this is crazy, I'm gonna go to my car.
Right.
It's that simple. But your emotions take you to the point where you're not controlled by what you would normally do. You're controlled by group mind.
Right.
It's no different than when there's a forest fire, all the animals run away from smoke.
Yeah.
Because they're using that group mind intelligence for preservation. Humanity, we have not that option. We don't use group. Occasionally it'll happen, like if there's a tornado and a lot of people go to help, but at the same time, you have the people that are going to people's houses to loot them.
That's the danger. It's the danger of dogma and things like that. Is it just the group think, the mob that just feeds on each other without even that much information. It just organically rolls out on itself. It's terrifying.
Because we're all linked.
Yeah.
People don't realize that you're linked to all the other minds, the minds that you don't like, the minds that you like, and the only really protection is using your own guidance to deter you from those kind of actions.
Yeah.
But we see it, through history. Why do people in concentration camps that were just the guard let things go? Why did the people that lived in the town where they could smell all the dead bodies never question it? It's not their problem, so they're not going to question it. And before you know it, that's how civilizations get affected, and that's what we see in history. But the whole thing with metaphysics is that people aren't looking at it from that. They're looking for the tricks. They want to learn the tricks and the magic. And that's not going to get you anywhere.
That's why I think some of these enlightened, like stage magicians, that are about that make it a point to disprove psychics and this kind of stuff. That's why I love them, because it's just they're very adamant that everything I'm doing isn't real. I'm not going to tell you how I do this because we have a code and stuff, but I can tell you it's fake. And anybody that does this trick and says it's real is a liar. Because if I can replicate what they're supposedly doing with ghosts and stuff, and I will tell you I'm lying and it's an illusion, then and that's why there's been a couple of magicians that throughout history that have really done that, and they're great because they still have that code, but they have a way of saying listen, this isn't, he's not bending the spoon with magic. Yeah, go ahead, Louis.
Yeah, I thank the Theosophy because it made my mind active. For instance, right now, a lot of my friends, they say, did you buy a ticket? Did you buy a ticket? Everybody is connected with the lottery. They want to play lottery. Say, no, I don't
Wait,
want
can you
it.
still buy a ticket?
No,
It's like $1 billion, isn't it?
I think so.
it's an illusion. This is for me, it's an illusion to win a lottery. And the other thing is that right now there is a eclipse is coming. Everybody's scared.
Oh, I know, I heard what
I'm
the
doing
mom always telling me, I'm like, oh.
Astrology people are losing their minds. Yeah.
How do they make with our mind, with our brain? And you see, the Theosophy give you some tools not to be passive, but active.
Well, and she talks in Isis Unveiled, she talks about these priests of these cultures and stuff that were able mathematically to tell when these eclipses and stuff were going to happen, and they're doing exactly what's some hacks and things that to this day are. They're saying that they produced that phenomenon just because they know the laws of nature and they know what's going to show up, but they're not going to tell anybody because it's this secret knowledge only they have, and so they can make the aurora borealis was utilized in that way for thousands of years because these priests could predict when it was going to happen, and so they would plan very significant events for when these colors were going to show up. They didn't know what it was, but I think they knew it wasn't what they were saying. Maybe.
Well, the bad thing about it is that some that know when they're going to happen, and they use it to manipulate people.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's the problem, because the more you manipulate people with this phenomena, the worse karma you begin to get.
Ooh.
Because now you're involved in a lot of lives, changing their, changing their way of how things they should have been.
You're involving yourself on that whole cultural
Right, exactly. So that's the idea with Theosophy is that it's giving us a lot of keys. You did mention earlier when you were reading about Plato, that she saw him like the link between the East and the West or something like that. So the term link, she gives us a lot of links in the study of Theosophy to understand, to interpret things in a better way. And she doesn't have, like you were saying with the Christianity or any religion, what she's doing is really just giving us a truer meaning of things and not just interpreting things in a different way or just a material way to manipulate people. So then you begin to see these links or these keys that sometimes, like we mentioned before, like today, the meaning of today in Christianity or Catholicism, it has many different meanings. Whether it be spiritual, individual, whether it be astrological, there's a new sun, the spring arrived. There's a new what do you call season. So therefore, you can apply these things not only to resurrection, the resurrection of the sun, or the resurrection of life, which it means a lot, other things in Theosophy. There's one phrase that in resurrection, one of the meanings is the passage through ignorance, from ignorance to a spiritual realm. And that would be resurrection. Because when you read in there, the different nature of the spiritual man and the vehicle of the body. So the idea of this regeneration is sort of like a resuscitation or resurrection, that means. You're resurrecting yourself really from a different state of consciousness. So there's a meaning, and what she does in the Secret Doctrine, she really comes. I was looking for it, but I couldn't find it. I want to paraphrase where he says that Theosophy takes all the I want to say vestures, all the covers away from the truth, because many systems of religion or philosophy are only using one of the covers, to kind of make it dogmatic. But Theosophy takes all of that away, and it takes you straight to the meaning of what truly we are.
Yeah. I latched onto that part you said, like truer principles and things, because there's that in Isis. There's this way of her when she goes to these subjects and these things. You've always known that there was some significance to something, but then she explains it right there. Her way of, like you said, of stripping away the vestments of these things that you were like, there's something there, and then her really not just explaining it, but telling you this is where it came from. This is what it is, and it's not mine. I'm not whipping this up. This is from here, and this is from here. And and that was just something that I was always really kind of obsessed with like my degrees are mostly history, and I was always kind of blown away by just what Colin was talking about, how like we have a lot of examples that we can supposedly learn from. A lot, and no one does. History is just it's just this record of us making the same mistakes over and over and over on different time scales. Sometimes really quick, sometimes really long, but like we've made every mistake the Roman Empire has and we know what happens. We know that like there's no righting the ship with empires, that it's at best, it's a really slow decline, unless who's going to be that culture, who's going to be that people, the first unprecedented people in history to look at their society, to look at their world and say, this is not going well. We need to right the ship and actually right that ship instead of before everything falls to ruin. I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of historians believe that there's no real national change until people are fighting for bread in the streets. You know, and unfortunately it's true a lot of the time, and we have to believe, I have to believe in some kind of society that is able to break that, to just break the slow decline of late stage capitalism or tyranny or what have you. But
Any of the online people have comments or anything? I don't see them.
yeah, we haven't checked in this.
Anyway.
Anyone online got any questions or anything? Let me look at the chat. I've been ignoring it. No, I think we're good.
We're all good. Okay.
Yeah, James or Anders, if you have anything to add, make sure you let us know. I'm not doing a great job of watching. I'm moving on to the 10 propositions. Number 2, nature is triune. There is a visible, objective nature, an invisible, indwelling, energizing nature, the exact model of the other and its vital principle, and above these 2 spirit sources of all forces, alone, eternal and indestructible. Does anyone want to take a go at that? This is something that I've heard. This is one of the things that when I hear Pierre and some other teachers talk about, I kind of just pretend I understand what nature is triune. And I kind of get it, but I couldn't really explain it.
Well, it's the same thing you learned in Christianity. There's the body, the soul, and the spirit. And she's pointing out that one is the dominant, which is acting through the other 2. And without the spirit, the soul is the intellectual part, and everything, even a rock, has an intelligence. So, yeah.
So everything has spirit, not everything has soul.
Everything has soul. The rocks have a collective consciousness. Birds have collective consciousness. It's just a different aspect of soul than human soul.
See,
Spiritual soul. That's the thing, like when she...
So flies? So,
absolutely.
yeah, actually today I was driving and I saw this group of flies like in front of me while I was at the red light, just like going like this together in a
like
spiral.
yeah.
What, like, I don't know what they're doing, but yeah, it's like a collective, yeah.
Maybe they were trying to tell you something.
Wow, maybe, I don't
I
know.
mean, million tourists a day go to Austin on the big lake, and every night there's these zillion bats that come out over the lake, and they just do these, like, I mean, it's radar and, you know, spatial awareness, but they're in perfect concert, hundreds of them, in these whirlwinds and these shapes, and it's amazing.
Blavatsky speaks as an analogy of the bees. The difference between the bees and us. We have what we call individuality, which we kind of, you know, move in our own way. And bees don't. Bees work all for the queen. So there's that collective consciousness. So they all work for the collective consciousness. They don't think like ourselves, not that I know, you know, but they don't just work for their own benefit individually. So they all work for the collective. So she gives an idea that we can become that. Not that they are higher than us or lower, but we came out of the collective consciousness to become self-conscious, because there's consciousness everywhere. There's nothing, there's nowhere where there's no consciousness. Everything has consciousness according to Theosophy. But consciousness and self-consciousness is a little different. So according to the secret doctrine, then man has become aware of self-consciousness from the 3rd round on. And therefore, you know, the awakening of mind, so-called, in us. So therefore, we become individualities, but then we become kind of selfish. So the idea is to regain that idea of collective consciousness by being aware of it. Just like the bees, now that they work for the whole, and us working for the whole, therefore we have the faith, the nucleus of brotherhood of humanity.
Well, and that's the thing. We look at bees as being a lesser species, lesser beings, but they can dance maps. they do dances to give directions.
Right.
They're literally dancing a map to their. I don't know how we would ever perceive that.
How would we eat without bees?
Again, without pollination, yeah. And it's amazing things like that. I love that too about the variety of things we think we've got like communication down, methods of communication. I can't remember the word for it, but the Mayans had a form of communication, the strings and knots, and it's all like these drapes of strings, and the colors and the knots are communication directions to. They think a lot of them are in these temples. They think some of them are warning of traps or the right way to go and things like that. But no one has any idea how to translate them anymore. But that's almost a form of like sign language. It's visual only communication that is so hard for us to kind of even conceptualize that. But yeah, it is. I think it's, again, I'm kind of going over one of the things that I love about Blavatsky and Isis and her writing is she maintains this sense of wonder. She might not be making miracles and phenomenon, but she can really like spark your imagination and your ambition for betterment or for even more knowledge, I think. Rose has a really good question that's I think is a very common one that I don't know if there's anybody's really decided on yet. But she says it is okay to eat vegetables and meat. I mean, they're both conscious.
I was just thinking about the life of plants. Remember, I think I was guys here and watched that movie here, The Life of Plants.
Well, William T. just has an article on that.
Mm.
And if you think about it, without consuming other lives, we don't live. We're breathing lives, really. We don't know it, you know.
It's thousands of
But we're breathing lives.
on you.
And so, yeah, of course, some Theosophists, you know, began to become vegetarian. So it's up to anybody what to eat.
What level you're gonna eat. You can't live on sunshine and water. Yeah.
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 In The Simpsons, there was a third level vegan. I only eat things that don't cast a shadow. It was the level 3 vegan.
And some, I mean, we have some samples of, you know, some of the meditators. I think and there's a movie about the, what's it called, the Little Buddha or something.
Yeah.
See, because they can get nutrients out of the thin air.
Mm.
But of course, you know,
Vegetarian or something? Is that what?
It's one of the things they talk about in the different schools of Buddhism where like ascended masters and stuff no longer need to like consume to eat. They literally like feeding on, you know, energy and sun, almost photosynthesizing. Yeah.
but our bodies are not really in that.
Yeah, but it's not important for us.
Yeah. But so the idea is, it's up to anybody what to really eat. But I think what the idea is that our mind, what kind of thoughts do we have? I mean, I can be the best vegetarian, but can I hate my neighbor?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. You know?
No, you're totally right though.
So a lot of people, and also, I guess, you know, am I being vegetarian only because of my own benefit, or do I really want to help other lives?
Yeah, James has a great point that is really not universal, but is in many religions. Is like you take a minute to at least acknowledge the life that is feeding you, be it a prayer, be it a meditation, be it a mantra, something to at least acknowledge that your life is going on because of the death of this. You know, I think that's very ethical and an important thing to do in all traditions. But
The Dalai Lama once made a comment that he occasionally will eat yak because his doctors told him.
Oh, I think I heard that too, yeah.
And he had to cut back on eating blueberries because it was making his constitution too cold. And that's why he was getting sick when he traveled.
Huh.
Wait, really? Blueberries?
Yeah. He liked blueberries, but he said it was too cooling and when he was traveling.
Interesting. Yeah,
And I think he's pretty ethical when it comes to
I mean,
these ideas, but I think he's also pointing out a fact that like certain people, their physical constitution needs something besides water and air,
sure.
sunlight.
I have a habit of, I've been vegetarian for like most of my life, and you know, sometimes I'll be in a pescatarian phase, or sometimes I'll do something where I'm like, oh, I'll only eat poultry because birds are some kind of lesser being or something. But then, like, I'm always have to eat my hat on those things, because then, you know, someone will send me a video of some like magpie that has this extremely close emotional connection with these dogs, and like you can see this just rabid intelligence in this bird that, like, okay, there goes that idea.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they all suffer. It's one of those things that, like, even if you're eating carrots, who's to say a carrot doesn't think just because it doesn't have a recognizable nervous system, or it doesn't have the physical attributes for thinking that we see in us? I don't know.
Rose has some kind of comment.
Oh, yeah. Rose. Oh, she's talking about me. Oh. I mean, it is where's the kind of the bummer is, like, unless I go to a nicer grocery store, I can't get I can't get my eggs that are non-cage and not pasture raised, and you almost can't get any organic meat at just kind of the regular grocery stores, or farm raised, open kind of.
Yeah.
Pretty hard to find, but you know, and that's hopefully one day that the prices of that stuff will go down because because the ethical way becomes more popular. But I don't know. It's the tough thing about being vegetarian and vegan too, is it's more expensive to not eat meat. It's wild. I mean, if you're really fresh and like raw, then and you cook a lot, Rose, go ahead. Oh, here we go. So is that not karma? Why can't we eat the animal that ate the vegetable? No, you have a point. She has a good point. That animal also was eating things, and it's not doing it morally. It's not accounting for the suffering of what it's eating usually. And we watch nature videos too.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
Yeah.
The difference with that is it's acting according to natural law,
right.
and we're acting according to our taste buds.
Our likes and dislikes.
Exactly.
So
And that's why I think it becomes so divisive. Sometimes people with are, dogmatically vegetarian, or dogmatically like you can't do this, can't do that, and it's, think about the mental attitude of that. It's separating people. It's not, your attitude about it is a separation, not an inclusiveness.
I once read this is from Zen master that I've read a lot about, and he talked about he once had an issue where his Sangha was turning to very, very strict vegetarianism, and they were teaching outside of the Sangha like the abolition of meat, the complete what is it called? Where it's really bad, complete no meat forever, you don't do this. And he had to, and this guy, I think it was Quan, but he had to come to his congregation and say, listen, he's like anybody that teaches 100% abstinence is an absolutist, and you're almost doing us more harm than you're doing good, because you're producing dualism. And like, people have different relationships with nature and things like that. And
There's people that can get sick.
There's people that need like meat proteins, like specific proteins.
I have a friend that's like, I guess he works for PETA now, but he was telling me that they were trying to get some law passed. I don't know if in Oregon or I forgot where nobody's gonna be able to eat meat. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, that's kind of insane to you. Doesn't it sound insane to you? Like, I'm like, what if people that get sick? Like, I've gotten sick before from being vegan.
Really?
Yeah, maybe I just wasn't eating the right thing. I've been eating cleaner lately and feel better, but.
Yeah.
awesome.
Luis.
I heard some comment from Sakuru. Somebody asked about veganism. He says veganism is not only eating vegetables. It's a whole culture.
Oh yeah.
It's a whole thing. is more profound than we think. We have to be aware of the nature and work with the nature for the nature, and the nature will respond to us on this issue, you know. But people think that the veganism is only eating vegetables and so on and so on. Like you say, is we just act on egotism.
Well, veganism was originally, like, it's from a Hindu religious practice, yes, a sect, that's originally where it was from. It had a very much more spiritual meaning, not just health and compassion.
And also the Rastafari. The Rastafari are the same. You know,
They have like a adjusted law of Moses almost, don't they? Like Mosaic laws types of things? Where things have to be washed. Yeah, I think so.
All right, one thing we know, at least at this time and era, is that, and I know I respect everybody and everything, but we know that vegetarianism doesn't make us more spiritual.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Really.
Like she said, what are my motives? You know, what is the mental attitude? Really. So I think that if you have somebody helping a group of kids somewhere, you know, and she's or he is vegetarian, I mean, she or he swear not to eat any meat or anything, but she's helping 100 kids, and there's no other food than eat some meat. She's gonna stop eating, you know, because she's, you know what I mean. So what is the motive? What is the purpose? You're really doing some good for something. I think that comes second in second grade. What you eat. Yeah. But of course, we know that, you know, eventually some people doesn't eat meat. You know, I mean, there's some adepts saying, what's the name that you mentioned?
Saint Germain.
Saint Germain.
Oh,
You know, we know a lot of like him. You know, they only ate certain fruits or, you know, some kind of nuts, right? And so, but their physical is already adapted to a point that they can do that. But also, what are they doing for humanity or for others? So I think the main motive is why you want to become vegetarian. You know, and maybe it came from more a spiritual point of view, like you and Luis were saying. But I think now it's like it's just a different thing, like everything else. It's kind of losing all the true meaning that it used to have before, most of the things. So the idea is that the mental attitude, I think, that's what it's.
Yeah. Well, and no surprise here, I think one of the greatest quotes I ever heard on the whole thing was Mahatma Gandhi said that he was in it. I didn't know, it was a long, old quote. I didn't know he was talking about cultural or national karma is what he was talking about. But he said, he said that any nation that can't figure out how to not be cruel to the animals it consumes or the things that the animals that drive its society is never going to figure out how human compassion is never going to figure it out. That's what he said. He's like, this is first. He's like, you got to be nice to the bees and the fish and stuff like that because before you can learn to be united brotherhood. Because man, people get way more annoying, and you get way more problems with people in your own species than you do, you know, puppies. I can love all dogs, no problem. Okay, moving on. Number 3, man is triune. I think we kind of covered that. Yeah. Number 4, will you read number 4, Kelly?
Magic as a science is the knowledge of these principles and of the way by which the omniscience and omnipotence of the spirit and its control over nature's forces may be acquired by the individual while still in the body. Magic as an art is the application of this knowledge in practice.
We do 5 twos.
Arcane knowledge misapplied is sorcery. Beneficently used, true magic or wisdom.
It's great. The thing that a lot of this stuff always brings me to, there's a lot of the stuff that drew me to Theosophy in the first place was magic and phenomenon and stuff. And what this often reminds me of is like the difference between Moses and the magicians of Pharaoh's court. Because the priesthood is basically, in most religions and wisdom traditions, what they call priesthood is magic. There's no difference between, it's these super physical bodies that are given to you by God, or the spirit, or whatever you see as God. And the misapplication of the priesthood is considered black magic, necromancy. And what a lot of religions say about that is misuse of the priesthood is literally using these abilities for anything other than altruistic purposes. If you're using it for personal gain or even for personal comfort, like that's sorcery. And so that's something I always come back to with this. But what's so wonderful about that is true magic or wisdom. That it's a synonym is wonderful. But yeah, I mean, does anybody have anything more to say about like magic as a science? Because that's a lot of what the secret doctrine is, and a lot of what Theosophy is the occult sciences and you know, apologizing religion with science and things like that. And so is there no place for like that, for like ritual or some of these other methods that have been shown as maybe kind of necromantic or even, you know, imposing your will on what you call like reality or the physical world? I mean, is there like, I guess what I'm asking is the opposite of sorcery, this magic or wisdom, how does it show itself other than just like understanding, or what we call epiphany, or like how does it kind of
Practical, you mean how?
yeah, like how do we see it in our everyday life? This, because you know, I can kind of see how I notice some sorcery.
You
I
have
mean, anything to do.
just look at how science uses science. And how does someone use their knowledge of metaphysics? And that's, I think, a big difference. You know, a couple examples from history was Paracelsus. Paracelsus treated people as a doctor, but he knew from the metaphysical side which herbs picked under what astrological condition would treat someone with two different people have the same illness, but he wouldn't treat them with the same remedy.
Right.
And he knew that because he was aware on the inner plane.
I mean,
He knew what properties, you know, he knew what properties would create a poison and how much, and using that same thing at a different time with a different amount would heal someone. And so that's the difference. Or he brought up the idea of Saint Germain. Saint Germain was trying to convince the French kingdom in particular and other kingdoms to loosen the grip that they had on regular people, because people were starving. And he was trying to get them to realize, if you don't change your ways, there's going to be a revolt and you're going to die. But they weren't listening to him. And the way he did that was he went to all their court parties and he hung out with them, and he had, you know, amazing jewels and all that stuff he
Really giving people jewels.
made. He didn't, you know, buy it and then bring it. And so he was using his understanding to try and change and improve the conditions of humanity.
But even like on an everyday basis, like if you learn through Theosophy your true nature, you know, the septenary nature, and in an interaction, if you did not know your true nature, you're going to mostly react to someone. If you're in an interaction, you know, talking with someone, you're going to basically based on your emotions,
Right.
based on your lower mind, your desires, just react. If you have some idea and can act from your more spiritual side, that you're not going to just react in an everyday situation. You're going to have a different understanding of how the situation could play out and how the other person is going to respond. And so that if you want a harmonious outcome, then you can direct that into, like, you know, harmonious outcome.
I mean, I guess what I think there's all that talk of it as a law, because you're acting in concert with karma,
Right.
basically.
Yeah.
That's,
If you're-
I mean,
if you're-
yeah.
If you're aware of that, yeah.
I find it kind of useful as well, that, not useful, but it's interesting to me that a lot of what Theosophy does deem magic can be today, and there was the beginnings of it there, but no one knew as much as she did. I mean, Freud and Jung were kind of pretty popular, but like she basically like, she kind of talks about it as is like most of the magic in Theosophy or things can kind of be explained psychologically now. It's like, are you really producing something, or is it already there? And you just by focusing were able to see clearly and see through. And it doesn't, I don't know if it really matters. That is magic, you know? So there's this old exercise that Robert Anton Wilson, this quantum physicist and stuff, he had a really benign early like test to test magic and psychology, and he said, you know, what you should do is you spend a certain time of your day where you have some time to just focus on a quarter and see this quarter in your mind's eye, like a meditation, you know, just to see a quarter, and to literally see how long it takes for a quarter to just show up in your life. Like, and what happens is like, yeah, it's amazing if you do the meditation, it is pretty amazing, but are you producing a quarter, or are you just able to see the quarters that are everywhere in our life that we're just not seeing from this meditation? And it's like, is it magic or psychology? And it's like, oh, both, I guess.
Well, it was mentioned earlier about the phenomena that Blavatsky was producing.
Yeah.
So we might say that the magic of it is that she knew what she was doing. You know, and of course, the meaning that we give to magic today, you know, is very different to what is explained in Theosophy. You know, making things appear, disappear, we might call it magic. But still, if somebody could do that and knew how to do it, we might say, oh, that's like magic. But that would be magic for him. So how can we declare that is magic? Well, because he knows something about the laws and how to move the stuff around, let's say. So really magic is that power or that knowledge that gives you certain power. So the knowledge of yourself is in itself magic. If somebody will tell me what I can understand now, you know, 20 years ago about Theosophy, not that I understand much, but I could have said, oh, this is like magic.
Yeah.
If it would have happened from, you know, one moment to another.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
The idea is that I have to go through it and learn it on my own. And then that has become, in a way, magic, because you have put an effort to it. And so the fact that you also change yourself in a different, you know, how do you act, how you act and how you think, is in itself something really magic. You know, so it's the knowing about things and using it for a good purpose. That might be one aspect, at least in our.
Well, that's why it goes beyond knowledge and it says it's wisdom, because it can't just be knowledge. It has to be some.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Wisdom.
And
Three more things that I want to mention is that the placebo. You know, the placebo make you create, you believe on something.
pretty magic.
You know, it's magic.
Yeah, it's a good point.
The other thing is homeopathy. They give you something that is very little. It's cure you in your body. And the third thing is that the Oriental medicine, the acupuncture, the herbs, and so on and so on. Can you believe those little things that cure you? It's a magic, isn't it?
But see, none of that is magic. None of that is magic. That is laws that someone knows how to use it. You take your car to a mechanic and you don't know anything about your car, and he says, oh, you need new brakes. He puts the brakes on and say, oh, my car, it's magically fixed. But that's not magic, and that's what she's trying to point out. There's a difference between someone being an illusionist, someone being a hypnotizer, and someone knowing magic. And I think, you know, we use a term for so many different things that it's lost its meaning, and,
Oh, yeah.
and that's what she's trying to put out, you know? The meaning has a very specific application, and it's understanding laws that are beyond the physical laws. I mean, we could say, you know, scientists, the astrologers know magic because they know when the sun is going to have an eclipse. That's not magic. They know the physical laws. What she's talking about here are metaphysical laws.
Yeah.
Behind what make the physical laws work. And your first example of a placebo is a good example of that. Because your mind has a power that you don't know how to use. So someone gives you a placebo that you think is a real pill. Now the mind is going to start using metaphysical laws passively because you think it's going to work and you want it to work. You don't want to get the placebo. You want to get what's going to cure you because you want to get better.
That power of belief is really.
And it's a focusing of your mind that you have something to focus with. And I think that's getting close to what she's talking about. But people use it in so many different ways that it's not what she would call white magic. The Secret, or the book, The Power to Grow Rich. That's using your mind to accumulate wealth in a semi-metaphysical way, which is.
James makes some good points, and it's something that's really, it's something to remember is studying Theosophy, is that, yeah, and it's outside of Theosophy as well, but that today's magic is, I mean, yesterday's magic is today's science, and I mean, that's kind of what we're doing, what especially what Blavatsky was doing was the metaphysics is still science, that this magic it's still science, it's still it's still adhering to natural law. One day, you know, maybe we'll be able to explain some of these other things, like it, but it's already there. It's just like a lot of things in like Theosophy, that it's something to be found and realized and like reached out. But if science doesn't understand it, then yeah, it's going to be seen as, I guess, magic or parapsychology, metaphysics, things like that. And then James, I like this. I think there's something to think about here. From what I've learned in the past, the big part of actual magic is time, location, environment, and karma. Like being in the right place, right time for karma to work through you. It's essentially what you're saying, I think, James. But yeah, I agree. Thank you. We'll move on. We just got a few more minutes. Maybe we'll get through this. I'll read number 6. Mediumship is the opposite of adeptship. The medium is the passive instrument for foreign influences. The adept actively controls himself and all inferior potencies. Thank Colin and company for helping us with that one before we even came to it. So we've been talking about exactly, but she just puts it so well. Number 7. You want to read number 7? You see it?
All things that ever were, that are, or will be, having their record upon the astral light or tablet of the unseen universe, the initiated adept, by using the vision of his own spirit, can know all that has been known or can be known.
Wow. The record upon the astral light. I mean, that's definitely when we get talking about the Mahatmas and the adeptship, there's definitely, we get into that. Is the record upon the astral light, is it essentially kind of what the Hindus call the Akashic records?
Oh, they're different. It would be good to read the glossary.
Really?
Between
Akasha,
because the Akasha slide that.
You want me to read the Akasha?
Yeah, read Akasha, and then you can read Astrolight. Because it's the Akashic records is the higher level.
Yeah.
And that's where true wisdom is, and when in the Voice of the Silence, HPV talks about three halls. She says the hall of ignorance, which is our physical plane, the hall of learning, which is the astral light, and the hall of wisdom, which is the Akashic plane.
Yeah, and I'll ask you guys forgive me on the Akashic Records thing, because unfortunately, my first exposure to that stuff was on the New Agey crystal side of things, and it was very much divination, and I don't think they had much of a grasp on terminology now.
You know, that there's been a lot of,
There's some charlatanry, I think.
well, there's been a lot of writers that use those terms, but don't use them in the same specific way that HPV is making a distinction. And so, you know, she explains a lot in the sense that the adepts working from the Akashic realm, trying to influence or help humanity, it has to filter through the astral light. And the astral light, in a certain sense, works like clouds and can block it. And then humanity's ability to receive that is blocked by their own nature, but then also their psychological makeup and the astral light.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and read Akasha from one of my favorite books, the glossary. Obviously Sanskrit, the subtle supersensuous spiritual essence which pervades all space, the primordial substance erroneously identified with ether. But it is to ether what spirit is to matter, or Atma is to Kalarupa. It is, in fact, the universal space in which lies inherent and eternal ideation of the universe in its ever-changing aspects on the planes of matter and of objectivity, and from which radiates the first logos, or expressed thought. This is why it is stated in the Puranas that Akasha has but one attribute, namely sound. For sound is but the translated symbol of logos, speech, in its mystic sense. In this same sacrifice, it is called God Akasha. In these sacrificial mysteries, Akasha is the all-directing and omnipotent Deva who plays the part of Sadasya, the superintendent over the magical effects of the religious performance, and it had its own appointed portrait priest in days of old who took its name. I think that's, yeah. And then Kelly, you have astral light?
Astral light, occult, the invisible region that surrounds our globe as it does every other, and corresponding as the second principle of cosmos, the third being life, of which it is the vehicle to the linga sharira, or the astral double in man. So that's one of the difference, because the Akasha was the spirit, and this is the second principle, the linga sharira, or astral double. The subtle essence visible only to a clairvoyant eye, and the lowest but one of the seven Akashic or cosmic principles. Eliphas Levi calls it the great serpent and the dragon from which radiates on humanity every evil influence. This is so, but why not add that the astral light gives out nothing but what it has received? That is, it is the greatest terrestrial crucible in which the vile emanations of the earth, moral and physical, upon which the astral light is fed, are converted into their subtlest essence and radiated back, intensified, thus becoming epidemics, moral, psychic, and physical. Finally, the astral light is the same as the sidereal light of Paracelsus and other Hermetic philosophers. Physically, it is the ether of modern science. Metaphysically, and in its spiritual or occult sense, ether is a great deal more than is often imagined. You want me to keep going?
No, I think that's enough. So what I'm kind of understanding. So is astral light kind of closer to as above, so below, kind of? It's the everything spiritual that's physical is spiritually in the astral light, correct?
If you think, let's say, I have a physical body, and I have an astral body, let's say. So the astral body penetrates the physical body. So we think of the earth is the physical body of that entity of the earth. The earth is the body. Then the earth has its own astral counterpart or body. So that's what that's what Chiré is called the astral light, because that then it reflects all of our thoughts, emotions, and passions. They're there in the astral light. So therefore, as she read, it doesn't really give nothing so spiritual, because it's only giving what we are putting into it. So everything that the astral light has is what humanity has kind of stored in there. So that's what we can receive too if we are up to that. And then Akasha, it's the first thing that appears as a field for the evolution of beings.
But Akasha is corruptible, correct? Like the astral light is kind of
Well,
corruptible.
the hardest part, because the astral part, we have to make a distinction between our astral body, the earth astral body, and the solar system astral body, we can say. So all of this is the lowest part of Akasha, we might say. So Akasha interpenetrates all of that. But Akasha is a lot higher or wider, and is very spiritual in a way. So this lowest part of Akasha, we might say, is the astral light, at least in this earth, because then we can see that there will be a different astral light in Mercury than there is on the earth. Just as, my astral body might be different than your astral body. But although all of this is in the astral realm. But I mean, it's not that easy, not even for me to.
Yeah.
Going along with it, but another way to think about it is she gives the principles of the cosmos and the principles of man, 7 principles. So the highest, or we could say the spiritual principles of Buddhi, universal consciousness, and higher mind would be Akasha. Kama and lower mind would be astral light.
Okay.
And that's the way to think about it.
Right.
But for us to have any awareness of what is on the Akashic plane, it has to be able to reflect in our lower mind. And so that's why any adept that is raising to higher planes of consciousness, if they're in the Akashic plane, they're on the plane of reality for this system. And they're on the plane of truth. And any knowledge, future and past, is all stored there.
Yeah.
That's kind of the difference between an adept and someone that has a psychic ability and can tell you who your grandmother was and when she died, but you can't tell you any higher aspect about your grandmother. And so that's kind of the difference between these two planes.
Well, and it's also, so I'm starting to understand. Yeah, it's also how, say, a really experienced like Buddhist Rinpoche receives what they call transmission teachings. When you'll go out and meditate at Rinpoche and receive these transmissions, and it's kind of like that. It's part of the Akashic record. He's somehow tapping into this record. These teachings aren't his. These are something that he's receiving from this more than the collective unconscious.
Past incarnations though, right?
I mean, sometimes that's not necessarily, it can be from Buddhas and stuff as well, yeah. Sometimes it's from your past or your future even too, but like usually a lot of times it's from an ascended, like a Buddha from not Earth realm, like not Shakyamuni, but some of these other representations. I'll go ahead and read the last few before we end here, just so we can get through. 8 is one that's a little controversial these days, unless you're like an anthropologist or evolution. I mean, a lot of things, but it says races of men differ in spiritual gifts, as in color, stature, or any other external quality, Among some people, seership, naturality prevails. Among others, mediumship. It's not really a controversial thing for me because I look at my own race, what we consider race now, not so much in the theosophical view of race, but I look at westernized white men and I'm like, yeah, we're not really built and conditioned, or even like, it doesn't even seem like the karma we're born into is very enabling or set up to do magic and meditation and be at one with these laws and things. I feel like that definitely the community and ethnicity I come from has more challenges to enter some of these spiritual realms and understanding, for sure. So I don't know about other ones, but mine definitely. And then
But you have to think when that they're saying that humanity is involved from various cultures through eons of time.
yeah,
So because you're a white guy in America now, doesn't mean in the previous time you were in China and studying in a monastery.
sure.
And that's why specifically they worked with HPV, because she had a certain amount of naturally developed psychic ability. And for her to explain these ideas from the East to the West, they had to use someone that looked like them, even though she was Russian.
That's what we talked about Judge too, with the
Judge.
dying at 7. Yeah,
And so the thing is that collectively you could make certain, you could say, yeah, generally in humanity, in America, it's going to be pretty hard to find any adept. But that doesn't mean that an adept wouldn't come here or wouldn't be born here for a karmic mission or
it's
something.
supposed to be happening more.
Yeah.
And so we'll see, yeah.
And it could happen, a lot of people were looking for the next revelation after HPV in 1976 and thinking it was going to come to the Western world. For all we know, that enlightenment could have gone to China, could have gone to India, could have gone to South America. But everyone's expecting them to come here because we got the first.
So when you get on the news, yeah.
And that's the thing. So people are looking for their next guru.
Yeah,
But it doesn't mean that because of the cycle they're going to come to the West. Maybe it's needed more in another area,
yeah.
and maybe other people are to their spiritual nature is more receptive, and it can be put to more use for humanity as a whole
Yeah.
than if it was to come to the Western world.
Well, one thing that always comes to my mind is the Aboriginal people in Australia have had a clear concept, a major part of their culture is the concept of the dreaming, this realm between the awake and the sleep. That's incredibly advanced for like a spiritual culture and things. I can't imagine us me having that intrinsically taught to me, that there's this realm that actually matters, that I can do things, that I can make changes, and actually that's not just a fantasy. They were taught that it was this, that it was almost, I think they teach that's even more important than the waking physical realm. But it's something that it's not considered a super advanced culture, but that's a really advanced principle and concept. I don't think we started messing with that idea for a long time in the West. And then next we've got 9 is one phase of magical skill is the voluntary and conscious withdrawal of the inner man, astral form, from the outer man, physical body. Oh man, okay, wait, these are kind of big. We should probably wait till next week.
Maybe for the, yeah.
I want to get through them, but this is a big one, yeah. Okay, we'll start with 9, either in a couple weeks probably. So next week there's going to be a break and a different teaching. I'll let you guys know in the email this week as soon as possible. And so we'll go to a different subject for 2 weeks or so, and then bounce back to here, number 9, to be continued. So you guys better remember everything where we're at. Let's see what. Got anything in the chat here? lots of stuff.
Easter and Jesus-ish
I'll respond to, after Rose, I'd like to actually get into this, but we gotta get going. But there is a lot of Easter talk, a lot of Christianity atonement talk, a lot of spring equinox talk going on that we have a lot more room for. So, thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, get that recording out.
Thanks, Anders, for getting up early.
Yeah,
Thank
Anders, great having as always.
El miércoles no vamos